Okay, so today we're going to start off with our COVID update. So good morning, Queensland. Today we have 5,795 new cases and 3,177 positive rats. Sadly, it's my duty today to report that 9 people have tragically lost their lives, and we extend our condolences to the families of those loved ones. 6 were in aged care. We have 384 people in public hospital at the moment, 34 in ICU. Our vaccine coverage is 92.45% at least one dose and 90.48% double dose, and 62.64% of the eligible population have received their boosters, and 5 to 11-year-olds is 41.66%, so that's fantastic news. So I'll hand over to Dr. Gerard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Premier. So sadly, we have 9 deaths to report today. This includes 6 people in their 70s, 2 in their 80s, and 1 in their 90s. Of these 9, 3 were not vaccinated. 2 had received 2 doses of vaccine, and 3 had received 2 doses of vaccine, and 3 had received boosters. 6 of the people who died were in residential aged care facilities. Again, our thoughts are very much with their family and friends. In terms of hospitalisations, it's stable at the moment. We have 384 people in our public hospitals being treated for COVID-19, about the same as yesterday when it was 382, and 33 people of these 33 are in intensive care. It's the same number as yesterday. In our private hospitals, 24 patients being with COVID-19. There were 26 yesterday. In school-aged children, again, numbers are fairly stable. 1,702 cases to report in the last 24 hours. There were 1,668 reported yesterday. And as I've said many times, the vast majority, if not all of these, have mild illness. There's been no increase at all in the number of hospitalisations among children since schools returned last week. 912 cases among the 5 to 11-year-old age group and 790 in the 12 to 17-year-old age group. I'll hand back to the Premier. Oh, sorry, go. Sorry.
Yeah, given these figures and at the end of the week, where are we as a state with COVID?
Well, as we've said a number of times, we're heading towards the end of our wave. We've said previously, it's looking at the waves of the pandemic overseas and interstate, it's generally been about 1 month up and 1 month down. The pandemic wave began here in Queensland between Christmas and New Year. So that started in the Gold Coast. It didn't start quite evenly across the state, but we expect we'll come to the end of the wave at the end of this month. Now, what happens in the tail beyond that is still somewhat unknown, because the whole world has experienced this Omicron wave almost simultaneously. So we don't have there's not a lot of other countries that we can look to see what happens, because we've all been within a few weeks of each other and experiencing this Omicron wave.
Are you quite relaxed about
I think, as we've said before, things have gone significantly better than we had expected in terms of hospitalisations, intensive care, admissions, etc. We were projecting significantly higher numbers than expected, and there is absolutely no doubt whatsoever that this is due to the wide-scale vaccination. Some of our epidemiologists have been doing some estimates on what would have happened were there not vaccination, and we're talking thousands of deaths and hospital system overrun. So wide-scale vaccination before we experience the wave is what has meant that Queensland has coped well with this wave of the pandemic.
Premier, the review of the restrictions and mask wearing, is there any chance, given these figures and what the doctor just said, that you might make a decision before the end of the month?
I will definitely let Queenslanders know before the end of the month about what restrictions will be eased. I hope to meet with Dr. Gerard over the next couple of days, and we'll work through what those easings of restrictions will look like.
What would we be looking at, apart from masks indoors? What other things?
Well, don't forget, New South Wales and Victoria have announced their easing, but they were a couple of weeks ahead of us in the wave. So I think that's a fact that needs to be conveyed to the people of this state. But secondly, we're now coming off that wave. Those numbers are coming down. But don't forget, still we have around 40% of our children that are vaccinated, and the wearing of masks is helping to stop some of that transmission.
Yep. So we might hear next week that they're going to restrict them.
Definitely before the end of the month, so people know they'll have plenty of advance, and hopefully if we keep that trend coming down, that's going to be fantastic news. Okay, now I might move on to electricity. So at the moment we know that households, a lot of people are doing it tough across this state, and it has been a firm commitment of my government to keep our assets in public ownership, but also to have that asset dividend go back to households and families. So today we're very pleased to announce that the government took the decision yesterday that we would be giving an electricity asset dividend rebate of $50 to households. This will be in people's electricity bills that they receive in the third quarter of this year. So we understand that some households are doing it tough, and this is another commitment of our government to continue to ease with those cost of living pressures. And I'll hand over to the Energy Minister, Minister de Brenni.
Thank you, Premier. As the Premier said, we understand that every dollar counts for Queensland households. And currently we are working on an energy plan that will outline and chart our pathway to a clean energy future for Queensland, including cheaper electricity. But we're also determined to put downward pressure on prices and ease those cost of living pressures for Queensland households right now. And our proud ownership, as the Premier has said, of Queensland's power companies means we can again deliver $50 back into the pockets of Queensland households. Now, the Australian Energy Regulator has just this morning pointed out that a combination of high peak demand, the outages at a number of large power stations in Queensland, combined with very high coal and gas prices globally, has resulted in a forecast increase in the default market offer. Now, the default market offer is the maximum that electricity retailers can charge in southeast Queensland, and around 11% of households in Queensland who, for whatever reason, have not chosen to seek out a better market offer remain on the default market offer. And our government recognises the pressure on Queensland households, and we also recognise that over the course of the pandemic, more Queenslanders have been at home using more electricity. And so that's why we have responded today with this $50 asset ownership dividend going back to Queensland households. Now, Queenslanders can save themselves even more if they do shop around. For example, the average Queensland family can seek out better offers, saving them around $523 a year. But the best way to ensure that Queenslanders and their power prices remain affordable is to invest in more renewables, particularly in energy storage. And because Queenslanders own their power assets, we can continue to keep downward pressure on prices. And we know with this dividend announced today that they will be $50 cheaper for Queenslanders. And we also know that under the LNP and their plans for asset sell-offs, that money would have ended up in the pockets of overseas shareholders. Now, we're also investing $2 billion in new renewable energy and storage across Queensland to deliver cheaper, cleaner electricity. By the end of next year, we will have delivered at least 1,815 megawatts of new wind across 5 projects in Queensland, 872 megawatts of new solar across 4 projects in Queensland, and 40 megawatts of community batteries. That's the equivalent of 2 massive new power stations of clean energy for Queensland, supported by the Palaszczuk government. But we could do even more with the support of the federal government. It's been 7 months now, 7 months since the Premier wrote to Prime Minister Scott Morrison indicating that we would deliver a $2 billion commitment for new renewable energy and electricity storage here in Queensland. And since then, despite inking deals with other states, he has not committed a cent to Queenslanders, not a cent to help Queenslanders and support more affordable and cheaper electricity here in this state. In fact, what he did was spend $31 million on a campaign about energy, but actually delivered nothing for Queensland. And again, we see the Prime Minister ignoring the needs of everyday Queenslanders. Now, I'd also like to just address some of the other major announcements in the electricity sector that have occurred today. There was an announcement out of New South Wales that Australia's largest power station will close early, and that was an unexpected announcement. And I want to make this clear to all Queenslanders. We will not be shutting the gate on Queensland's publicly owned power stations, because they will continue to play a critical role in this state's energy transformation. And our energy plan due later this year will outline both how we will deliver more renewable energy for Queensland and confirm the ongoing role for those publicly owned power stations. And as the Premier said, it is only because of our commitment to public ownership of Queenslanders' energy assets that we can both guarantee more renewables and the job security of Queenslanders, particularly in regional communities. Thank you. Well, that matter has been undertaken to be dealt with by the Director General of the Department of Premier and Cabinet, and that is not my department.
You know who it is?
No.
We'll be clear on that too. Did you or anyone from your office ever instruct a public servant to ask Mike Summers to change that?
No.
Have you ever used private emails or business purposes?
No.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Today I want to announce a key review into culture and accountability into the state public sector. But before I do that, let me make a couple of observations. In my time as Premier, I've delivered on a number of integrity reforms to the people of this state. We've done real-time disclosure of political donations. We've lowered the caps on the amount that people can donate. We've put a ban on developer donations. We've introduced a Human Rights Act. We've restored the independence of the CCC, not to mention the appointment of Tony Fitzgerald to review the CCC itself. These build on measures introduced by former Labor governments, including the establishment of the Office of Integrity Commissioner itself. And most of these reforms that I've outlined have been fought against by the LNP. Now, I want to assure Queenslanders that I have been listening and I've listened, and my government absolutely intends to act. And that is why today I'm pleased to announce that Emeritus Professor Peter Coldrake, AO, has been appointed to conduct a review into culture and accountability into the state's public sector. The review is broad-reaching and will incorporate all relevant public service agencies and entities. He will look at 6 key areas: the culture of the public sector in ensuring ethical decision-making and impartial advice to the executive, the nature of interactions and interdependencies between integrity bodies, the public sector and the executive, legislation underpinning the existing ethics and integrity framework, adequacy of systems to prevent ethical accountability and integrity issues arising, adequacy of ethics training and communication and relevant policies, timelines of processes to resolve ethical and integrity complaints. Now, the 21st century has brought about rapid changes, not at least in technology. And over these last 2 years during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of people working from home as well. Some people have adapted to this and some people haven't. And I want a modern, dynamic, 21st century public sector in this state. I absolutely believe that Peter Coldrake is the right person to lead this work. He will report in 2 phases. The first will be in 2 months' time, and the second 2 months after that. Both of these reports will be released in full. That is a commitment I'm giving to the people of this state. And let me also assure the people of this state that we will act on all of the recommendations that he presents. Happy to take questions.
Premier, you've resisted
court. Yes.
You've spoken a lot about his qualifications,
yes.
His history. Are you concerned about the perception of him being a former Labor Party?
Look, that might have been in the past, but let me say this. My understanding is that the LNP government also commissioned Peter Coldrake to do some work. He has been a former Vice-Chancellor of QUT for 14 years. I have no doubt that he will treat this review seriously and he will deliver key recommendations to government.
Say from the past, but I've got electoral commission records here to show in 2018 he was a donor to the Labor Party. Peter Coldrake gave $1,760 to Labor. Were you aware of that when you were joining?
No, I wasn't, but I am absolutely confident that he will do a thorough and effective job. Now,
this is an inquiry into the Labor Party, the Labor government.
let me say very clearly, the LNP also commissioned him to do work as well.
But you must be concerned about the public perception.
I think the public should be absolutely have confidence in the fact that he was a QUT Vice-Chancellor over the past 14 years. And I don't think anyone is going to question his reputation.
Premier, you've resisted calls for weeks about
Yes,
you've
sorry.
resisted calls for weeks about a wide-ranging inquiry. What's convinced you now?
Look, I listen to people and I've been listening very carefully. And I've said very publicly that we could do better. And you've asked me, how could you have done better? And I've thought about this long and hard. I've spoken with my colleagues and we have put in place this review.
When was Peter Coldrake approached?
I understand that my Director General approached him.
Premier, this won't investigate individual complaints, so
No.
how can public service employees voice their concerns, and will they have protections that are granted to whistleblowers?
Of course there are protections, and Peter Coldrake himself will go and engage with people, and I would hope that he does random samples as well. I think it's really important to get a snapshot of the public service, and also too the interaction between the public service and the executive. And if out of this we can see more training, more understanding of people's rights and obligations, that people know where to go and make complaints as well. We've already written to the public service advising them of that, but perhaps there does need to be more training and people need to feel very comfortable and confident in the way in which they can make complaints. I understand the Triple C's looking at that.
Will there be public hearings?
Sorry?
Will there be public hearings?
That's a matter for Peter Coldrake.
You say you were listening to people.
Yes.
Is there a perception that what's going on there is impact on that?
I acknowledge we can always do better. I have said that time and time again. And I pride myself in integrity and transparency in government. And you all know that I was elected on that in 2015. And I pride myself in that, and my government has given and has implemented key reforms. These key reforms have been voted against by the LNP. And, many people may have forgotten the legacy of the Campbell-Newman government, but I haven't. I haven't forgotten that. And I'll stand up against that every day that I'm holding this position.
Do you think you've misjudged this issue from the start? When you've changed positions on the do you think the initial response was wrong?
I have listened, and I will always listen to Queenslanders, and Queenslanders expect their governments to listen to them and to deliver them. We're building new schools, we're building new satellite hospitals. Today we've announced a $50 rebate on their electricity bills. We understand that cost of living is an issue for Queenslanders as well. And anything that we can do better, we should strive ourselves to have to be able to have a health check on the way things operate. I think that is healthy for the democracy that we live in. But we also, if you could, sorry. Sorry?
It's more than the vibe.
Sorry?
It's more than the vibe.
Look, at the end of the day, we need to do this review. We need to do this review for good government. And I don't think anyone is going to criticise that. In terms of the last time something like this was done was back in 2009, 2010. So yes, it is time to actually make sure that we are adjusting ourselves to the 21st century and the way in which communication, the public service and training operates.
Do you have confidence in Robert Sutter?
Lydia, sorry? I don't think so, not at this stage, but Peter Coldrake is able to go out and talk to whoever he wants to talk to.
Do you have...
Sorry? He will outline all of that. I'm leaving that entirely up to him. because I've said very clearly that this is a comprehensive review. We've also had Peter Bridgman do 2 reviews as well for the public service. The first one focused on the public service and changes to the Act. Now the second part was about modernising the public service and also looking at ethical codes of conduct as well. So I think that this review also feeds neatly into his second phase.
Do you have confidence in Robert's setup?
Sorry?
Do you have confidence in Robert's setup?
Yes, I have confidence in all of my public servants, and unless there is something, unless there is something that is, unless there is some evidence to the contrary.
Why do you think that?
Because the individual complaints, there's a whole range of mechanisms that are out there for people to have a look at. This is about culture, accountability, and it's also about methods of training that may be needed across the whole spectrum of a modern, dynamic public service. Sorry, can I just raise one other issue too on here? Yep. So in great news today as well, we have seen the trailer drop for Baz Luhrmann's masterpiece, Elvis. This dropped a few hours ago this morning. Over 700 jobs in Queensland were part of this film. Filmed here on the Gold Coast, and I think Queenslanders should be incredibly proud, and I'm looking forward to seeing the film when it's released in June.
How much were they paid to bring
Sorry?
How much were they paid to bring the movie here?
It was a contribution between the state and the federal government. Yes? Just a couple more questions, yes? I'm happy to look into those issues. Sorry, I'm happy to look into the issues you've raised. I know that the Health Minister's been here and addressed many of those issues, but in relation to your specific issue, I'm happy to talk to the Health Minister. The last I heard, we've secured the site and we're looking at the planning. Yeah. Yes.
Makes this distinction between the Rugby Corporation building it and the state leasing it
Correct.
for a year. Why did you never make it known that the state was contributing to the construction costs before now?
Let me make it very clear that Queenslanders should be incredibly proud that we have our own purpose-built quarantine facility in this state. It is something that Queenslanders are proud of, and it's something that I'm incredibly proud of, that the construction has been finished. You can remember the debates when we had people coming into our hotels and the virus was spreading over the period of 2 years. We had 5,000 people in hotel quarantine. We had hundreds of police. We had hundreds of health staff as well. Now, in relation to the capital costs, we had to seek permission from the Wagners to release that cost, and we did so the other day. The total cost, if you can let me finish please, the total, I'm trying to answer the question. The total cost of the Wellcamp facility, the total cost, is below any other quarantine facility in the nation.
Can I just ask you to answer the question of why you didn't outline that you were contributing to the building costs until this week? Were you misrepresenting the arrangement?
No, not at all. And let me say very clearly, you can go and ask Queenslanders, and they're pretty pleased that they have a dedicated quarantine facility that will be put to use not just for a pandemic outbreak into the future, but can be put to use for a whole wide range of purposes. And it started construction in October, and it's actually finished.
But why not spell that out?
Sorry? Yes. My understanding was that there was some issues that were being looked at. You'd have to ask them, Lydia. Yeah. All right, last question, then we've got to go. Last question.
Instructed public services that a review of the Public Records Act is not a priority.
No.
So you do believe it's a priority, or what's your view on the Public Records Act?
Well, The government has a range of agendas before us, not the least of which is to deliver cheaper, cleaner electricity, support job creation here in this state, and make sure that we get Queenslanders healthy and safe through the pandemic. There are a range of other demands upon government, but we've got to make sure that we prioritise those that are most important for Queenslanders.
Do you believe the Minister's office should be able to intervene in annual reports of the state archives?
I reject the assertion that anyone's intervened in anything.
But do you believe the Minister's office should be able to intervene?
Well, they're not a matter for me. So.
Well,
Gotta go.
Thank you.
Thank you.